So, make sure I had that ready. Okay. Good morning. It's been a while since I've given a sermon before, so this is going to be interesting. Okay. First, I have to list some disclaimers, but they're not apologies. They're just disclaimers. There is a difference. My faith tradition is Christian, and to be specific, United Methodism. So don't be surprised if some of my references are based in that direction. And I want to say that while I may work in a hospital, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a unit desk clerk, I'm not a phlebotomist, I can barely say the word, let alone try to be it. And I just train them on how to use their electronic medical record system. And I always tell them at the beginning of the class that I have no clinical training. And I said, except I used to teach Red Cross first aid to Boy Scouts back in 1973, watching them put tourniquet around people's necks. But anyways, that's another story if you want to hear. That was kind of interesting. And that usually impresses the doctors and nurses that I'm training. So any similarity between what I'm about to bestow upon you and real diseases, okay, are totally non-existent. So you can't sue me for malpractice. Sorry. I don't have that kind of insurance. Okay. But what I would like to talk to you about this morning now are diseases of the church, what I call diseases of the church, or any organization or business. They all have the same kinds of issues, or social club. But these are going to be my top 5 that are diseases that can infect and greatly affect an organization, such as the body of the church. So there are 5 infectious diseases, as I call them. And the first one is called cancer. Cancer. Okay, just want to make sure. It's also known as the Humi flu, because it's very common, but I'm very glad to see that it doesn't happen a lot in this church. But it's like symptoms to watch out for are, would you serve on the board? Cancer. Would you be coffee steward? Cancer. Would you read the UU moment? Who, me? You get the picture. It takes all people to make up the church today. Think about trying to walk with one leg in a cast. Has anybody ever had their leg in a cast? It's not easy. So you need the entire body to work together in order to reach your goals. 1 Corinthians 12:4-7 says, "Now there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good." In 1 Timothy 4:14a says, "Do not neglect the gift you have." I firmly believe that everybody has given talents. We have to use them, but for good, not evil. Okay. Talents are talents because they are gifts that we are required to share. And examples. This church is very much blessed. And, of course, there's no question about, I think in all agreement, that the gift of organization has certainly been given to Ned and Marie when it comes to our yard sale. And we are certainly very well blessed with musicians in this congregation. Myself, of course, we all know how blessed what my talents are in puns. And, of course, how much Ann loves my puns. But everyone needs to do their part. I've had friends all the time tell me, when I talk about being in a show or being in a concert or such, and that they said, "I wish I was musical. I wish I could act. I wish I could sing. I wish I could dance." And, well, it takes audience members, too. Otherwise, who are the performers going to perform for? So everybody has a part. Everybody has a role that they can do. And certainly your part or role can actually change. Sometimes we are the audience, and sometimes we're the ones on stage. I won't put in a plug for the concert we're singing at in September. Anyways, so the first one is the cancer or the whom flu. Second one, smallpox. Our church is too small to make a difference. Well, a few things about that. There was a little tiny movie several years ago that had to do with a guy who was training to be a master of his religion. I think it was called Star Wars. Well, he had landed on his X-Wing fighter on this swamp planet, and he was learning from the master. And by the way, the X-Wing fighter is kind of like a biplane of the space age. Okay, but his master said, use the Force to raise your ship out of the swamp. Well, he tried. He extended out his hand, trying to look real dramatic, and it started to bubble and started to rise up, and then it falls back into the water again, further than it was before. And he goes, I can't do it. It's too big. And then Yoda, his master, says, oh, wait a minute. Judge things by your size, do you? Well, you should not. And he opened up his hand that has only 3 claws. 3 claws. There we go, that's better. And then with using the Force, he raises it up and moves it over and sets it down on dry ground. Well, you should not judge things by your size. Sorry, I had to do that. And I don't do a good Yoda voice. But in the United Methodist Church, the last statistics that I had read, that 60% of the churches are small churches, under 200 members, and they do a lot. They do a lot. And there was one church that I remember, it was heated by a potbelly stove. And every Sunday morning, people would go there and start up the potbelly stove to warm it up in time for service. Size of the church doesn't matter. Look at the Love Flows, our Love Flows program, and all that has done for this area, and what we do for helping out with the backpack program at Shikellamy School and now others, I believe. Correct? So I firmly believe that the church is only as small as its faith. So if you think you can't do anything, then you're not going to be able to. But if you reach for it, you can do it. You don't need to be a huge church to do that. Infectious disease number 3 on the hit parade. Mononucleosis, emphasis on mono, also known as the Lone Ranger syndrome. One person does it all, or is expected to do it all. The major problem with this is that you tend to take advantage of a person who does everything. And you don't stop to think necessarily that they may need help. One of the nice things about this congregation I like is, yes, we have a pastor, and it's wonderful, but it's also great to hear from other folks from the pulpit as well, and for their views and insights. Okay, I get the right spot here. One of the major factors in the beginning of the Methodist Church was to get laypersons more involved. Because in the Church of England, you had to be a trained minister before you were allowed to speak in front of the congregations. John and Charles Wesley took a lot of flack because they dared to actually go out into the streets, into the masses, and talk to them, and taking barroom tunes and putting gospel words to it, and because they already knew they knew the tunes, they just needed to have the right language, and they got in a lot of trouble for that. Just in the same way that John Priestley, yeah. Joseph, I knew it was a J. Joseph Priestley, got in trouble in England because he was saying stuff that the Church of England didn't like. Actually, isn't that why a lot of people left the England anyways, to come over here, because they get away from the Church of England? But this also frequently goes along with cancer. So hopefully we'll stay away from that one too. Infectious disease number 4 on the hit parade. Yeah, number 4. there was this one church, the church I grew up in, well, there was this one pew that was the Smith family pew. They were the only ones that sat there. The only ones that were allowed to sit there, I think. And that's where they always saw the pulpit, was from that one pew. Well, pneumonia is only seeing things from one direction, from one location. I was very blessed in that I always had pastors that said, first of all, it's good to read from different translations of the Bible, because then you're more likely to find out what the real get real insights from it, as opposed to I know there was one church, the King James Version is the only version you are allowed to read from. And so I was very fortunate in that I had pastors that said, yes, read these other interpretations, and don't be afraid to question those. How else are you going to find the real answers if you don't question? But also today, though, pneumonia can fit along with you only listen to one news source. You only read one blog, only one commentary, only one minister, especially if they leave. I've being formerly a certified lay speaker in a Methodist church, I would see frequently where like they had a pastor for like 8, 10, 15, 30,000 years, and then a new pastor comes in, and well, other pastor didn't used to do that. The other pastor would do it this way. The other pastor would say this. I'm going to go, in fact, usually in a Methodist church, they will move them far enough away from their previous church so that people won't follow them. And I thought that was a really good practice to do. But we need to be open to see what the Spirit and others can show us and teach us, even if what they show us is different than what we already believe. We can become stagnant because we always did it that way. There's a story that I think you've probably heard before. This young man was going to spend, the young man and his wife were going to host the family holiday dinner for the first time. And he's getting all nervous when he walks into the kitchen. He sees his wife preparing food, and he's helping out as much as he can. And he sees her take the roast and cut the ends off the roast and put it into the pot and then put it in the oven. And he just looks at it and goes, "That's really odd." And he goes, "Dear, why did you cut the ends off the roast?" And she goes, "My mother always did that." So he got curious. So he went out into the dining room where his mother-in-law was setting the table, and she goes, "Why did you always cut the ends off the roast?" And she goes, "Well, my mother always did it that way." Well, Grandma happened to be sitting in the living room, so he went in and said, "Gram, yes. How come you cut the ends off the roast before you put it into the oven?" And she looked at him and she goes, "Do I do that?" "Yeah, I guess I do." She goes, "But why?" "Oh, I know. Because when I first got married, the pan wasn't big enough, so I had to cut the ends off to get it to fit into the pan." It's like sometimes we get stuck in we never did it that way before, therefore we can't do it that way. Put yourselves, in 2 Corinthians 13:5 states, "Put yourself to the test and judge yourselves to find out whether you are living in the faith." Don't be afraid to question what you believe. I always get harassed all the time when I see people posting things on Facebook and they don't check their facts before they post it. Same thing. You got to, question things. Don't just believe. Just because you want something to be true doesn't make it true. The last one, I call this leprosy. Colossians 3:13 through 15. "Put on then, as humanity's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony, and be thankful." I consider the leprosy part to be sore spots in the church. They may have always been there. They may be recent, and they could be like because of a pastor leaving or because of a pastor coming in or whatever reason. In the early church, circumcision was a huge issue, but so it could be anything. But as long as we are human beings, there will be frictions and sandpaper people, air quotes. Those kind of people that just kind of rub you the wrong way. No, we don't know anybody like that, do we? But they rub you the wrong way no matter what they do. I try to think of those people as the ones who are smoothing out my rough edges. There are many cliches, but the point is, don't dwell on the past. Move on. Don't let those sore spots, affect anything. So those are some of the diseases of the church or any organization, as far as that goes. But what are some of the preventative medicines that we can avoid? First of all, stay away from that healthy slice of apathetic pie. Quickest way to kill a church or any organization is someone else will do it, or we've never done it that way before. I used to work in a window and door industry, and there was the shop, the engineering department, which is where I was at. We would say, we could probably do better if we did this way. Well, it would go, I'll be fine until it hit the shop floor, and it'd go, we can't do that. So stay away from someone else to do it, and stay away from we've never done it that way before. But some things we can use, some prescriptions that Dr. Olafson this morning will give you. Prayer pills or medication meds, however you want to look at it, daily. Spend some time relaxing and shutting out the world to help get centered and focused. Even if that's just sitting out on the back porch with a cup of tea or a glass of lemonade, or whether it's in a corner in deep prayer and meditation, spend some time separate and just shut the world out for a while. Also, make sure you do get a healthy dose of fellowship fricassee, as I call it. Nobody can make it alone in this world. Reach out to others and be willing to be reached out to. Feast on the love, peace, and support that is given you by your friends, family, or congregation, or co-workers. Is there a doctor in the house? Which I didn't say that at the beginning. That's what the name of the sermon is. Yes, the great physician. And for some that means God. For some that means that inner voice. For some that means scientific knowledge. For others, it is some or all of the above. Go forth and be healed and heal.